Admiral Zrek of the Galactic Hegemony stood on the bridge of his ship, the inevitable Victory. He looked at the small blue-green planet on the main screen. It was just a normal world at the edge of space, going around an average yellow star. Reports called it a Class 9 death world, harsh, dangerous, and home to a species that had grown up under constant danger. They call themselves humans, his science officer Vic said. Simple technology compared to ours. They have barely left their own planet, with only a small base on their moon and a research station orbiting their world. Zrek's mouth parts clicked as he laughed. And yet they said no to our terms. Bold for such a small species. The first contact had been normal. The hegemony found new civilizations, told them to join right away, and took what resources they needed. Most species agreed immediately, seeing no point in fighting against such a big power. The humans, however, had politely said no. Their speaker, a male named Alan Carter, said they respectfully choose to stay independent and asked us to set up diplomatic talks instead, Vix went on. Diplomatic talks? Zrek laughed, the sound harsh and grating. We don't talk with primitive species. Get ready for a warning strike. Target their biggest military base. Let's show these humans what happens when you refuse the hegemony. As the orders went out, Lieutenant Drac, who had been in many conquest campaigns, came up carefully. Admiral, our biology experts have noted some worrying features in the human body. Like what? Zrek asked, not really caring. They grew up on a high-gravity world with big temperature changes, strong sun rays, and air full of germs. Their bodies can fix major damage, they can eat almost anything organic, and they can work for days without sleep. Every species has its features, Zrek waved a limb dismissively, but none have stood against our technology. Go ahead with the attack. The hegemony ships moved into position above Earth, weapons charging. On the surface below, in a strong bunker, under the Rocky Mountains, Alan Carter watched the alien fleet with grim determination. They're making a mistake, he said to General Susan Kelly, who stood beside him looking at the tactical screens. They have no idea what they're starting. Susan nodded, her face serious. The movement of civilians from likely target areas is going well. Our space platforms are armed and ready. First contact protocol has officially changed to Defense Condition 1. God help them, Alan muttered. They have no idea what humans can do when threatened. The first hegemony strike hit the North American Combined Defense Command with terrible force, the energy weapons making a half-mile crater in the earth. Admiral Zrek watched with satisfaction as secondary explosions spread across the impact site. Send the surrender demand again, he ordered. They should be more willing to listen now. But instead of surrender, what came was a response. Dozens of previously unseen missile holes opened across the planet's surface. The simple-looking rockets that launched seemed almost funny to the hegemony watchers, until they reached orbit and exploded, releasing thousands of small, moving drones that swarmed toward the alien fleet. Impossible, Zrek whispered as the first drones reached his outer ships and exploded in nuclear flashes. They couldn't have had this technology. Our scans... Sir, Vix interrupted, voice tight with sudden fear. I believe we may have made a mistake. In the 3 weeks that followed, humans showed just how big a mistake it was. The alien fleet lost 7 ships in the first day alone. They had expected an easy win, but found a species that fought with desperate creativity. The hegemony still had the advantage in space, raining down destruction on major cities, but every time they sent ships to land, they met fierce resistance. Human soldiers, though less advanced, showed an alarming ability to adapt. They quickly learned to attack the weak points in alien armor, to set traps that used the invaders' own technology against them. What confused the aliens most was the human will to fight. Other species had given up after seeing the hegemony's power. Humans just got angrier, more determined. They're using our own fallen troops' equipment against us, reported a shocked ground commander after a failed attack on a human military base. They figured out how to use our weapons in less than a day. On the inevitable Victory, Admiral Zrek faced growing doubts. The conquest that should have taken hours was now stretching into weeks with no end in sight. "What is wrong with these creatures?" he demanded as another report of human resistance came in. "Don't they understand they can't win?" "Sir," Vic said, quietly, "I've been studying their information networks. They have thousands of stories about fighting against impossible odds. Their entire history is full of smaller forces defeating larger ones through what they call asymmetric warfare. They seem to enjoy the challenge." Zrek stared at the planet on the view screen. The hegemony had already used enough firepower to subdue 3 normal worlds, yet the blue planet's defenses were growing stronger, not weaker. In a deep bunker, Susan Kelly addressed the combined military leadership of Earth. Representatives from every nation sat together, all old fights forgotten in the face of alien attack. "We've learned from the wreckage of their ships," she said. "Their technology is advanced, but their tactics are rigid. They expected us to surrender and have no plan for a long fight. Their ground troops are struggling with our gravity," added Colonel Sam Davis, covered in bandages from a recent battle. "And they can't handle our environmental variations. We've seen them falter in rain, in cold, in heat." Alan Carter, now coordinating global diplomatic efforts, spoke up. "More importantly, they don't understand humans. They see our different nations and think we're divided. They don't realize that humans unite when faced with outside threats." Susan nodded. "Exactly. And now we're ready for Phase 2, the counterattack." That night, as the hegemony fleet arranged itself for another day of orbital bombardment, hundreds of small, stealthy craft rose from Earth's oceans, a launch method the aliens had never considered. Each carried a simple but effective weapon, a nuclear warhead attached to a captured alien drive system. The night sky lit up with explosions as the human suicide drones found their targets. On the planet below, civilians watching from bunkers and shelters cheered as alien ships burned. In orbit, Admiral Zrek watched in horror as a third of his fleet was crippled in a single attack. "How?" he whispered. "How are they doing this?" "Sir," Vic said, real fear now evident in his voice, "I believe we should consider tactical retreat and reassessment. These humans, they're not like other species. They're Deathworlders, and I think we've made a terrible mistake in starting this war." 3 months into the war, Admiral Zrek was no longer laughing. Half of his fleet was damaged or destroyed, and the humans had proven much more resourceful than any species the hegemony had ever fought before. "How?" he demanded, hitting the table with his limb. "How are they learning so quickly? Their technology was hundreds of years behind ours." The officers around him looked uncomfortable. Commander Geel, head of intelligence, spoke first. "They are like scavengers, sir. They have picked up pieces from our destroyed ships and figured out how they work with amazing speed. They should not be able to understand our technology, let alone copy it," Zrek hissed. "The humans have something they call total war," Geel continued. "When threatened, they turn their whole society toward fighting. Their factories now work day and night. They have changed normal factories to make weapons, and they come up with new ideas all the time." Zrek stared at the display showing how the war was going. The humans had lost millions, true. The hegemony had destroyed several of their biggest cities and military bases. But the resistance was growing stronger, not weaker. On Earth, at the new United Earth Defense Command deep under the mountains, Susan Kelly had been made Supreme Commander of all Earth forces. The room was filled with people from every nation, all old fights forgotten in the face of possible extinction. "The teams working on alien technology have figured out how their shields work," reported Dr. Frank Miller, head of the science division. "The new weapons that can get through their shields should be ready in 2 days." Susan nodded. "And what about the captured alien engine?" "We have managed to make it work with our biggest ships," Frank replied. "It's not pretty, but it works. We can now go as fast as their ships, at least the smaller ones." Across the table, Navy Commander Will Peterson added, "The submarine fleets have been given the new stealth technology. The aliens still don't seem to understand how we fight from under the water." "Good," Susan said. "Humans have always been most creative when backed into a corner. Let's show these aliens exactly what that means." In orbit, the human counterattack began with a surprise move. The oceans, which the hegemony had mostly ignored as not important, suddenly erupted as nuclear submarines launched special missiles. Instead of normal warheads, they carried devices that made electromagnetic pulses tuned to the frequencies of hegemony shields. At the same time, the first human ships, using alien technology, came out from hidden bases on the far side of the moon, attacking the hegemony vessels up close. They're not trying to win, Zrek realized with horror as he watched the humans sacrifice ship after ship to cause strategic damage to his fleet. They're just trying to learn, to gather information for their next move. Sir, Vix reported, human. Communications have increased a lot. They're sharing information globally, working together with a level of teamwork we didn't think possible for such a divided species. The biggest shock came when hegemony ground forces, landing to take key resources, met human resistance fighters, the aliens who had evolved on worlds with lower gravity and less environmental pressure, found themselves facing enemies who could work despite injuries that would stop most species, who could march for days with little rest, and who used fighting techniques that seemed crazy yet very effective. They don't fear death, a shaken hegemony commander reported after a failed ground attack. They keep fighting when they should give up. One human, badly wounded, blew himself up rather than be captured, taking a whole squad with him. By the end of the third month, Zrek was forced to ask for help from the Hegemony Council, something that had never before been needed for conquering a single planet. These Deathworlders, he reported reluctantly, are unlike any species we have met. In the deep bunker on Earth, Susan Kelly met with the science and strategy teams. Despite heavy losses, human morale remained strong. Each alien technology they captured opened new possibilities. We've learned something interesting about their biology, Frank Miller explained to the group. They evolved on low-gravity worlds, with stable climates. Their bodies aren't built for endurance or adaptability, which explains their rigid tactics, Will Peterson added. They're used to fighting enemies who behave like they do. Our unpredictability confuses them. On the screens around them, reports from around the world showed both devastation and hope. Cities lay in ruins, but from the rubble, new weapons factories had been built underground. Millions had died, but the survivors worked with a unity and purpose never before seen in human history. The hegemony doesn't understand what they've awakened, Susan said quietly. Throughout our history, humans have faced disasters, plagues, wars, but we always adapt and come back stronger. In space, the rebuilt human fleet, now using a mix of Earth and alien technology, launched a series of hit-and-run attacks against hegemony supply lines. The aliens, used to fighting set-piece battles with clearly defined fronts, struggled to counter the guerrilla tactics. They attack from nowhere, cause maximum damage to our weakest points, and disappear before we can respond properly, a frustrated hegemony fleet commander reported. And they keep changing their methods. As soon as we adapt to one tactic, they switch to another. The Hegemony Council, facing the first serious defeat in thousands of years, sent reinforcements. A second fleet even larger than the first, but they found the humans ready for them. Earth's atmosphere was now protected by a network of orbital platforms using copied alien shield technology. The oceans teemed with submarine carriers that could launch aerospace fighters from unexpected vectors. And on land, human forces had become expert at using the planet's varied environments to their advantage, drawing alien troops into terrain that negated their technological superiority. You don't understand humans, a captured Earth soldier told his alien interrogators, laughing despite his wounds. Every time you kill one of us, 10 more become determined to fight. Every city you destroy makes us hate you more. You can't win this war through force. In his flagship, now part of a reinforced fleet, Admiral Zrek received new orders from the Hegemony Council. Destroy all major human population centers from orbit. If the species wouldn't submit, it would be exterminated. As the fleet moved into position for the genocide attack, sensors detected a massive launch from Earth, thousands of small craft rising on pillars of fire. Ignore them, Zrek ordered. Their primitive missiles can't hurt our capital ships. But these weren't missiles. They were escape ships, carrying millions of humans to hastily established colonies on Mars, on the moons of Jupiter, and in habitats hidden in the asteroid belt. The Deathworlders were expanding through their solar system, creating a resistance that couldn't be extinguished with a single blow. And as the hegemony fleet opened fire on Earth's cities, a new message broadcast on all frequencies, translated into the aliens' own language. You came to our world uninvited. You attacked without just cause. You've killed millions of our people. But you've also taught us something valuable, that we're not alone in the universe and that we need to be ready to defend ourselves. This isn't the end. This is just the beginning of humanity's fight, and we won't stop until we're free. Zrek listened to the message with growing unease. In all the hegemony's long history of conquest, they had never encountered a species that spoke with such conviction in the face of overwhelming force. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps the hegemony had made a crucial mistake in attacking this world of Deathworlders. 6 months into the war, the Hegemony Council was in a state of panic. What should have been an easy conquest had turned into a long, costly conflict using up resources at an alarming rate. Worse news of the human resistance was spreading throughout the Empire, causing unrest on recently conquered worlds. The humans have started attacking our supply lines, Fleet Commander Osric reported to the gathered council. He had been sent to replace Admiral Zrek, who had been called back in disgrace. They've developed small, fast ships using our own technology, combined with their simple but effective nuclear weapons. How are they getting the resources for this? Asked Counselor Mav. We've bombed their industrial centers many times. They're adaptable, Osric replied uncomfortably. They've moved, manufacturing underground. They've created spread-out production networks, and they learn from every fight. Each time we destroy their forces, the next wave of weapons comes back more effective against our defenses. On Earth, despite the destruction of major cities and the loss of hundreds of millions of lives, humanity had found its pace in the desperate struggle. The underground command center was busy with activity as Susan Kelly coordinated the global resistance. The alien psychology is their weakness, explained Linda Ross, the lead alien psychologist. They evolved as a hive species with clear ranks. They expect centralized command and predictable responses. Our distributed leadership and unusual warfare confuses them. And their ground troops are physically disadvantaged, added Colonel Greggy. Martinez, who had led several successful guerrilla campaigns against hegemony landing parties. They're stronger in raw power, but they have poor stamina. Their environmental suits can be damaged easily. They're not used to fighting in the varied conditions of Earth. Susan studied the global strategy map. We've contained their landing zones in Asia and North America. Our new orbital platforms have prevented further mass bombardment. Now we need to take the fight to them. The captured ships have given us enough understanding of their technology, Frank Miller said. The volunteer pilots are ready. Susan looked around the room at the tired but determined faces of military leaders and civilian scientists working together. Begin Operation Hornet's Nest. In space, the Hegemony fleet detected an unusual movement. Hundreds of small craft were coming out of Earth's atmosphere, barely more than seats attached to engines, each piloted by a single human. Ignore them, Commander Osric ordered dismissively. Their weapons are too small to damage our capital ships, but the humans weren't aiming for the capital ships. Instead, they targeted the Hegemony's fuel transports, maintenance vessels, and communication relays. Each human pilot selected a single target, sped up to maximum speed, and then did something the Hegemony had never seen in centuries of warfare. They deliberately crashed their ships into critical systems. They're sacrificing themselves, Osric exclaimed in horror as the suicide attacks tore through his support fleet. Sir, his tactical officer reported, they've broken through to the manufacturing stations. They're boarding them. Inside the captured Hegemony facilities, human special forces teams, trained in zero-gravity combat and equipped with reverse-engineered alien technology, took control of manufacturing systems. Rather than destroying the stations, they reprogrammed them, turning the Hegemony's own production capacity against them. This defies all logic, Osric reported to the increasingly concerned council. No species should be willing to sacrifice so many for strategic gains. Their birth rate can't possibly sustain these losses. What the hegemony failed to understand was the human capacity for adaptation, not just technologically, but socially and psychologically. Earth's nations, once divided, had united completely. Resources were shared, scientific developments flowed freely across borders, and a single purpose drove the entire species: survival. And underlying it all was something the hegemony, with its rigid hierarchical structure, couldn't understand: the human willingness to sacrifice everything for freedom. As the months passed, more hegemony outposts fell to human attacks. The aliens, used to fighting conventional wars of position, were unprepared for the human approach of targeting supply lines, communications, and manufacturing rather than engaging in direct fleet battles. They fight like no species we've encountered, a hegemony strategist reported to the council. They avoid our strengths and attack our weaknesses. They sacrifice short-term gains for long-term advantages. And most concerning of all, they're beginning to understand our psychology better than we understand theirs. On a captured hegemony manufacturing station, now converted to human use, Susan Kelly met with the leaders of the off-world colonies. The exodus from Earth had continued, with millions of humans now living throughout the solar system. Earth is holding, she told the assembled leaders. The hegemony's ground forces have been contained, and our orbital defenses prevent them from simply bombing us from space. But this war won't end until we take the fight to their core systems. The prototype long-range ships are ready, reported Laura Jones, who oversaw the Mars colonies. Using the hegemony's own drive systems, we can now reach their nearest outposts. And our understanding of their language and communication systems has improved, added Pete Andrews, head of intelligence. We can now intercept and decrypt most of their tactical commands. Susan nodded. Then we're ready for the next phase. It's time to show the hegemony that attacking Earth wasn't just a military mistake. It was an existential one. The first human attack on a hegemony outpost beyond the solar system shocked the alien empire to its core. A small fleet of converted ships crewed by volunteers jumped into the Proxima system and destroyed the military installations there before the defenders could even report the attack. But what truly confused the hegemony was what happened next. The humans left the civilian centers untouched and broadcast a message on all frequencies. We fight only those who fight us. Join us in peace, or at least in neutrality, and you will not be harmed. The Hegemony Council, watching reports of the attack, couldn't understand the human approach. In all their history of conquest, the concept of limited warfare was unknown. You either destroyed your enemy completely or you submitted to them. They're trying to turn our own subjects against us, Counselor Mav realized with growing alarm. This isn't just a military campaign, it's an ideological one. Throughout the hegemony's empire, news of the human resistance spread, despite official attempts to control information. On 100 worlds, species long subjugated by the aliens began to whisper about the Deathworlders who fought against impossible odds and offered a different vision of galactic society. Back on Earth, in a bunker beneath the ruins of what had once been Washington, D.C., Susan Kelly received the first response to humanity's message, a secret communication from a group on one of the hegemony's oldest conquered worlds. "We have heard of your resistance," the message read. "We too wish for freedom. Tell us how we can help." Susan smiled as she read the message. The humans had gone from fighting for survival to fighting for a cause that might reshape the galaxy. The hegemony had made a terrible mistake, not just in underestimating humanity's military capacity, but in failing to understand that ideas could be more powerful than weapons. "Send them everything we know about hegemony weaknesses," she ordered. The revolution has begun. 1 year after the first hegemony attack, the war had changed both sides. The hegemony had committed nearly a quarter of its total military resources to subduing a single planet, an unprecedented allocation that was straining the empire. Earth, despite terrible damage to its environment and the loss of nearly a third of its population, had evolved into a powerful military force. "The situation has become unacceptable," Grand Strategist Kell informed the Hegemony Council. "The humans have now captured enough of our technology to build their own fleet. They're no longer just defending their world. They're taking the war into our territory." Impossible, Counselor Mav insisted. They've been contained to their solar system. No, they haven't, Kel replied grimly. 3 days ago, human ships attacked our outpost in the Vega system. They destroyed the military installations but left the civilian centers untouched. They transmitted a message before leaving. What message? The council leader demanded. This is what mercy looks like. Learn from it. The council chamber fell silent as the meaning sank in. The humans weren't just fighting for survival. They were now advancing their own values. On the newly commissioned Earthship Defiance, Captain Olivia Dixon watched as her fleet prepared to jump to another hegemony system. The vessel represented the best of human-alien hybrid technology. Hegemony drive systems and weapons merged with human innovation and computing power. All ships report ready, Captain. Her first officer, Commander Joe Rivera, reported. Remind all captains military targets only, Olivia ordered. We're not here for revenge. We're showing the hegemony there's another way to exist in this galaxy. The human fleet had adopted a strategy that confused the hegemony, targeted strikes, against military installations while carefully avoiding civilian casualties. After each attack, they broadcast the same message to hegemony worlds. We fight because we must, not because we desire conquest. When you are ready for peace, we will listen. This approach was having an unexpected effect. On worlds long controlled by the hegemony, populations were beginning to question the official story. If these primitive Deathworlders could challenge the mighty hegemony while showing restraint, perhaps the Empire wasn't as invincible or righteous as claimed. Back on Earth, in what had once been the Swiss Alps, but was now a heavily fortified mountain complex, Susan Kelly met with the United Earth Council. Despite her military background, she had become an advocate for a specific approach to the war. We've shown we can hurt them, she told the assembled leaders. Now we need to show them why they should talk to us instead of continuing this fight. Some say we should press our advantage, said President Claire Wilson. The hegemony wouldn't show us mercy if our positions were reversed, which is precisely why we must, Susan countered. We're not fighting just to survive anymore. We're fighting for a vision of the future. If we become like them to defeat them, what was the point? Frank Miller, now heading the Alien Technology Integration Division, added, We've learned something crucial about the hegemony. They've been the dominant power for so long they've stopped evolving. Their technology is advanced but stagnant. They haven't faced a real challenge in thousands of years. Meanwhile, Linda Ross continued, our understanding of their psychology has deepened. The hegemony leadership fears change above all else. Our adaptability terrifies them more than our weapons. The Council voted to approve Operation Open Hand, a daring diplomatic mission that would bring humans face to face with the hegemony leadership for the first time since the war began. In the hegemony central system, the arrival of a single human ship caused panic until its transmission was received. We come under flag of truce to speak directly with the Council. We will take no hostile action unless attacked. To the surprise of many on both sides, the Council agreed to the meeting. Captain Olivia Dixon, accompanied by diplomat Paul Nelson, walked into the Grand Council chamber, the first humans to set foot in the heart of the empire that had nearly destroyed their world. You fight unlike any species we have encountered, the Council leader began. Now you speak of peace while your ships strike our outposts. Explain this contradiction. Paul stepped forward. There is no contradiction. We fight because you left us no choice. We show restraint because that is our choice. We are here because we believe there is a better path forward than mutual destruction. And what is this path? Asked Counselor Mav skeptically. Alliance rather than control, Paul replied. Exchange rather than exploitation. We have studied your empire during this war. You conquer because it's all you know, but your empire stagnates because of it. New ideas are threats rather than opportunities. We offer a different model. The humans presented evidence of their rapid technological advancement, not as a threat, but as a demonstration of what cooperation with independent species could offer the hegemony. This war has cost both our peoples dearly, Olivia added. But humans do not seek the destruction of the hegemony. We seek the freedom to determine our own future, and we believe all sentient species deserve the same right. As the meeting concluded, the council leader approached the humans privately. Your proposal challenges everything the hegemony has stood for across millennia. Many will resist. Change always faces resistance, Paul replied. But consider the alternative. This war has proven we can hurt each other terribly. Wouldn't it be better to see what we could accomplish together? Back on the Defiance, Olivia and Paul discussed the council's reaction. They're afraid, Paul observed. Not just of our military capability, but of the ideas we represent. Will they agree to peace terms? Olivia asked. Not immediately, Paul replied. Their empire is built on the idea of absolute control. But we've planted a seed of doubt. For the first time in their history, they're confronting the possibility that there might be a different way to organize galactic society. Meanwhile, across the hegemony's territory, resistance movements were growing. Inspired by humanity's example, long-subjugated species were beginning to challenge their overlords. Some did so through passive resistance, others through sabotage, and a few through outright rebellion. The hegemony, which had never faced a multi-front challenge, found itself struggling to maintain control. Military resources were stretched, thin, and attempts to crack down only fueled further resistance. On Earth, Susan Kelly received reports of these developments with cautious optimism. We never set out to bring down the hegemony, she told her advisors. We just wanted to be left in peace. But perhaps our struggle for survival could lead to something more, a fundamental restructuring of power in this part of the galaxy. In the Hegemony Council chamber, debates raged for days about how to respond to the human peace offer. Some counselors argued for committing even more forces to crush Earth once and for all. Others, seeing the spreading unrest, advocated for a strategic retreat and consolidation of power. The Deathworlders have shown they cannot be defeated easily, argued a younger counselor named Trell. And each day this war continues, more of our subject worlds learn that resistance is possible. Perhaps we should consider their offer. The council leader, who had ruled for centuries, looked out at the divided council with growing concern. Throughout the hegemony's long history, consensus had always been swift and unanimous. This disagreement was unprecedented and disturbing. We'll take one standard cycle to consider all options, the leader announced. But know this. Whatever we decide, the hegemony will survive. It always has. But as the leader retired to private chambers, a thought that would once have been unthinkable emerged. What if the hegemony couldn't simply continue as it always had? What if these humans, these determined Deathworlders, had changed everything forever? 3 years after the first hegemony attack on Earth, representatives from across the galaxy gathered on a neutral space station built specifically for this historic meeting. The peace conference marked the formal end of the Earth Hegemony War, and the beginning of an unprecedented diplomatic experiment. Admiral Zrek, once disgraced but now rehabilitated as a key advocate for reform within the hegemony, watched as human delegates mixed with representatives from dozens of species. Some had been part of the hegemony for centuries. Others were newly liberated worlds that had seized the opportunity to declare independence during the conflict. I still don't fully understand them, he confessed to Vix, who had remained his loyal science officer throughout the turbulent years. By all logic, they should have destroyed us once they gained the upper hand. That's because you're still thinking like a hegemony strategist, Vix replied. Humans don't just adapt technologically, they adapt philosophically. They fought like demons when cornered, but their ultimate goal was never conquest. Across the room, Susan Kelly, now Earth Secretary of Interstellar Relations, was deep in conversation with delegates from a dozen worlds. At 62, her hair had gone completely gray, and scars from close combat with hegemony forces marked her face, but her eyes were bright with the possibilities of the future. The collaborative treaty doesn't just benefit Earth, she explained to the gathered representatives. Each signatory maintains independence while gaining access to shared technology, trade networks, and mutual defense. The Hegemony Council, Would never have conceived of such an arrangement, remarked a delegate from a world that had been under imperial control for generations. That's why they stagnated, Frank Miller interjected. He had arrived with the latest data on technology exchange programs. Diversity of thought, approach, and evolution creates resilience. The hegemony sought uniformity, which creates brittle systems. The station itself stood as testament to the new paradigm. Built using hegemony engineering principles but incorporating human adaptability and innovations from a dozen other worlds, it represented a fusion approach rather than the imposition of a single standard. On the observation deck, Paul Nelson stood with Olivia Dixon, watching Earth rotate slowly below them. Both had aged during the hard years of war, but there was a peace in their expressions now. Did you ever imagine this outcome when they first attacked? Olivia asked. Paul shook his head. Survival seemed like the best we could hope for. But I underestimated humanity's capacity for growth. We didn't just adopt alien technology, we reimagined it. We didn't just fight the war, we changed its nature. And now? She prompted. Now we have to prove that peace can be as dynamic as war. He replied. The collaborative will face challenges from within and without. Some hegemony factions still cling to the old ways. Some human groups want revenge rather than reconciliation. The peace remained fragile. On numerous worlds, including Earth, the scars of war would take generations to heal. Vast areas remained uninhabitable. Billions of lives had been lost, but reconstruction was underway, fueled by the exchange of knowledge and resources that the new interstellar community facilitated. In the hegemony's home system, dramatic reforms were reshaping a society that had remained largely unchanged for millennia. The council had been expanded to include representatives from previously subjugated worlds. Military resources were being redirected toward exploration and scientific advancement. The humans taught us a costly but valuable lesson, the council leader admitted in a historic address. True strength lies not in conquest but in adaptation, not in uniformity but in diversity. The hegemony survived for eons through force. It will thrive in the future through cooperation. As the conference concluded with the formal signing of the collaborative treaty, Admiral Zrek found himself face-to-face with Susan Kelly for the first time. You could have destroyed us, he said, simply. Why didn't you? Susan studied the alien who had once commanded the fleet that devastated her world. There was no hatred in her eyes, only a weathered wisdom. Because that's not who we want to be, she answered. Humanity struggled with its own violent tendencies for millennia. When we looked into the abyss of extinction, we didn't just find the will to survive. We found the courage to imagine a better way forward. She gestured toward the gathering of species engaged in conversation, exchange, and occasional argument. This is harder than war. Finding common ground with those who are different, building trust after betrayal, cooperating without surrendering autonomy. These challenges require more creativity than destruction ever did. Zrek's mandibles clicked in what humans had learned was thoughtful reflection. The hegemony began as a means of bringing stability to a chaotic region of space. Somewhere across the millennia, we forgot that purpose. It's never too late to remember, Susan replied. The following day, as the delegates departed for their respective worlds, a young human diplomat asked Susan about the lessons of the war. She thought for a moment before answering. The hegemony made 3 mistakes, she said. First, they underestimated our physical capabilities as Deathworlders. Second, they failed to understand our psychological adaptability, but their greatest error was moral. They believed might makes right, and that power alone determines destiny. And what did we learn? The young diplomat asked. That sometimes, the strongest response to violence isn't more violence, but a better vision, Susan replied. The hegemony thought they were attacking a primitive species. Instead, they encountered an idea that was more powerful than their empire, the belief that diverse beings can coexist without domination. On the bridge of the Defiance, now serving as a diplomatic vessel rather than a warship, Olivia Dixon received a transmission from Earth. It was a simple message, but one that brought a smile to her face. First joint human hegemony science mission launched today. Destination, the galactic core. Purpose, knowledge, not conquest. As her ship prepared to depart for another diplomatic mission, Olivia reflected on the strange journey that had brought humanity from the brink of extinction to the forefront of a galactic revolution. The hegemony had attacked Earth expecting an easy victory over a primitive species. Instead, they had awakened a force that transformed not just humanity, but the galaxy itself. And across 1,000 worlds, the lesson was clear for all to see. Starting a war with Deathworlders was indeed a terrible, terrible idea. Not just because they were hard to defeat, but because when pushed to their limits, they might just reimagine the very nature of victory itself.